manufacturer likes to use that thin sheet of aluminum or whatever it is to create a connection. But when it rips apart, the seal between the processor and the heatsink is not that great, so we're going to have to do it the good old-fashioned way with thermal grease. You want to get that processor removed of all the gook on there and make it nice and shiny. And then be careful that there's no residue of the paper. If you're using a paper towel like I am, make sure there's no residue of a paper towel. It might burn up. So once I'm sure I get the residue off, it's a little piece of Scotch-Brite I'm using. Just don't use that. You don't want to push too hard with that. You can on the heatsink, but not on the processor itself. In fact, it's not a real good thing to use, but it might give you a little bit clean surface to work with. This gets to be kind of a pain. It's real gummy. When you get under that sheet of aluminum, there's a gummy residue that you have to get off. So just do the best you can. And then once we get a nice clean spot on the heatsink there, we'll reattach it, put a little drop of thermal grease, and we'll be okay. In fact, I'm using a real fine grade sandpaper here. Just getting off that stingy residue, which I will speed up because it might take me a while to do this. It actually took me a lot longer than I expected, so we're going to go to the next step here, and then we'll get that CPU heatsink and fan back on. We're going to test the connections we made using our voltmeter. We're going to set it for continuity, touch it to certain points on the circuit that we just created there, and see if, just make sure that there's no short circuit. I'm just touching a ground point, and then those two wires that we put on the motherboard, they're both on the positive side. They're positive points on the motherboard. So if we touch a ground point to one of those points of that red wire we just installed, and you hear a beep when you're testing for continuity, then you know, because it should not be touching any ground points, those wires we installed. There should be no contact with ground points. Just take our paintbrush and clean up as much of the bottom case as you can since you got it open. We're going to take the motherboard now. We're going to place it back into its spot. And we're going to see if it fits now that we added those wires. Those wires might be causing a problem where it won't fit now. So I'm just going to try to size it up and make sure that it fits. And I'm just looking to see if when I put the motherboard back, is it gonna create any short circuit with any of the points of the bottom case? Is our red wire going to be touching any points of that case that we don't want it to touch? Because remember, those wires weren't there before, so it's like an extra protrusion. You want to make sure that it fits okay and there's no connections made that you don't want to be made between the case and the wires that we installed. And I think we're going to be okay. Throw the motherboard in there. Again, if it doesn't sit flush, find out why. And in this case, it's not sitting flush because that wire was under there, which is the speaker wire. Now I'm going to speed up the video here. Again, this computer gets put together the same way it came apart. Use the proper screws and the proper holes there. Get it all back together. Clean it up, little bits and pieces where you can. Put the wireless card in there. We're going to put that screen back on. Screw the screen down, and then we're going to feed that wireless antenna through. And put it back in the little slot it goes in. Same thing with the LCD cable. Okay, that's in pretty solid. Attach the wireless antenna. Hard drive goes in there. And I'm going to slow the footage down as I install the heat sink on the CPU. Again, get the stickiness off of that CPU. I'm using Scotch-Brite, but just use it very, very gently if you're using Scotch-Brite. Clean it off with the paintbrush, make sure there's a good connection. I'm going to pull out the thermal grease here. I use Arctic Silver, but it's actually the ceramic version. So it's not quite silver, but the company's Arctic Silver. And I put a little dab on there. And I like to take a piece of Scotch tape, put it on my fingers long ways, and use it as a little steamroller to level out all the thermal grease, and it's the way you keep your fingers clean. I just don't trust when I just put a little glob of thermal grease on there, it's going to distribute itself evenly, so I like to distribute it a little bit. And now take your nice new clean heat sink